Okay, good afternoon. Seeing that we have a quorum, the Community Redevelopment and Housing Commission meeting of September 27th is officially called to order. Could we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Commissioner Kano, would you lead us, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Recording Secretary, please take roll call.
Richard Santana.
Present.
Angie Cano.
Here.
David De Leon. Monica Garcia. Mike Tardif.
Present.
Gary Wood.
Present.
Usuri Ramos.
Present.
Aurora Solano.
Present.
Vince Frazier. Gilbert Vasquez. Sir Chair, you have quorum.
Thank you very much. This is the time for the Commission to consider matters under consent calendar, items including number 1 and number 2. Do any members have any corrections to the minutes, items they wish to pull for separate discussion or abstain on? It appears not. Do I have a motion to consider items 1 and 2?
So moved.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Santana. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The matter is approved by unanimous consent with commission members noted as absent. Excuse me. The next order of business is consideration of the regular business items. The first item on the business calendar is item number 3, Interim City Manager Update. Is there any member of the public that would like to speak on this matter? If so, you may fill out a request to speak form with the secretary. You have 3 minutes to speak. Also, we will not accept any additional requests to speak cards once we begin the public comment session. If you haven't already done so, please give your form to the recording secretary. It appears we have no public speakers, so we will proceed. Will staff be reporting on this matter?
I believe I will be reporting on this matter. I'm Cynthia Kurtz. I'm the interim city manager here in Santa Ana, and I know your schedule tonight is busy. I actually had the opportunity to spend quite a bit of time on Monday, Tuesday, with staff going through the procedures and the policies that you're going to start deliberating on tonight on how we spend what are becoming scarcer and scarcer resources for providing one of the biggest demands in our city, affordable housing. And I want to leave you plenty of time for that discussion. I asked if I might come, though, and address the commission tonight. Really, when I got here, several commissioners from different commissions came to meet with me, and I realized talked to me about what their work was and things that were coming up on their agendas, and I realized how difficult that was on a one-on-one basis. People work, don't have time, trying to even get on my calendar, and so I decided that what would be easier for you is if I came to you and just addressed each of the commissions for a few moments and talked about anything that you might have questions on, but really talk about, from my standpoint, the relationship and the value of what you do for the city of Santa Ana. I meet with each of the council members twice a month, and one of the topics that I had began to discuss with them when I first arrived was the role of advisory boards and what do you do and how does that advice get to the council. And different things they said, certainly things like the policy you're going to be discussing tonight, they really value the time that you take to delve into it and provide recommendations. And then they talked about the one-on-one that they would have with their own appointees. But I realize as someone that reports to that entire board that you talking with just the person that appoints you is different than having a relationship with the council as a whole and that body as a whole. So we put together a proposal that council was very enthusiastic about to invite each of the commissions to come and address them and talk to them about what you're working on, what you'd like to work on, what you need, how things are going, things that you see that might be valuable to them as they think about whatever area you're studying, in this case, housing and community development. And I hope that if you have not already, that you will be in touch with my office about scheduling. We've had one commission already. We have 2 more that are scheduled in October. When Arts and Culture came, they were very well received by the council. They had questions. They all stayed and listened and talked to the commissioner that came to represent. So that's a first step that we have in making a stronger relationship between what you're doing and the council. With that, I'm really just here to see if there's something that you would like to tell me, something as a city manager that I can do to help the commission in their work, something that the staff I work with might bring forward to you, or something that you would like me to deliver as a message to the council, and see if there's something that we can change in the system, or how it is that the commission advises them, or anything else that you think I might be able to answer questions on, certainly.
Okay, thank you very much. If I could go first, Ms. Kurtz, I actually do have the letter from the city that I received it about a week ago by email and also in the mail.
Great.
And I intended to bring that up at the end of the meeting to what I had replied back to the letter and indicated that I wanted to come and address the council, but I was also going to ask my fellow commissioners if one or more of them wanted to participate with me. So I intended to ask them after the meeting to set that up, put together a cohesive plan, and then approach your staff to come and address the council.
That'd be great. I think
Okay.
they would very much like that.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it's a great opportunity to go and let them know what we've been working on and what we did accomplish in the past 6 months or a year that I've been on the commission.
And what you see coming up as you look at the work ahead, things that you know that we ought to be working on as a city.
Exactly. Do any commission members have questions or comments?
I'll go next. Yeah, my only concern last time was that we were having resources that were not being used. And they were saying that they were doing local TV to let the community know about it, but it's still, I feel like the city's not there. We're in community events, it's not really out there approaching the community to provide the services that are available. So I just feel like services shouldn't go to waste, like they should be used, and they're not being used to their full capacity.
So you're thinking about how the city communicates with the community, what services are available?
Yeah, so many of the community, they were saying they were doing some type of robocalls, but like I was telling them, like some of these parents are never home. Like they work 2-3 jobs, and emails, they don't really use emails. The communities that really need the resource don't even have a computer. So just the way that we're communicating with the community, I think there's a lot of work that could get done, but it's not really being out there.
Any ideas you have, and I first of all would agree with you, and we've talked frequently, not just on resources, but just communicating with the community what it is the council and the city does, and you're adding to that and what's available for resources for them to access. It's maddening after you sit at a Tuesday night meeting and you see the council do really good work and make decisions on really hard things, and the next morning the newspaper has managed to find one thing they don't like in a 6-hour meeting, and that's the headline. And so we talk about, how do we define our own message out there? There are great things happening in Santa Ana. There are good policies being adopted. This is going to be a good policy as it gets through the system. This is actually the policy, this is the agenda, but the housing policy you look at tonight. And how do we let people know that that good work is going on? And even that they can participate like they could this evening or at your next meeting and being a part of that. We don't do a very good job of that. We have individual departments that have newsletters. We don't have a citywide newsletter, but then we get to exactly your point. Most newsletters are email now. If people don't have email, do we go back to snail mail? What do we do? Any thoughts you have in that? I will say we struggle with that, and the only thing we've agreed on so far is we don't do it very well yet. It's something that I know that the council would like. The council talks to me. It's almost every agenda I have with them has communications on it, and any ideas you had would be much appreciated.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the last comment I had was just having presence out there. There were so many community fairs all throughout the summer, and I did not see the city just giving the information about what help is out there for them. And many of them could be something as simple as, I think Council Benavides has a town place that he just puts for advocating for what's happening in that community. Townsend. I didn't see the city of Santa Ana there, and there were so many places where they just got the community, the neediest communities together, and I didn't see the city like telling them like we have these resources available.
So good ideas. Thank you.
And I would like to echo Cano's remarks, because even our last Fiestas Plateras have been a prime example to reach the masses during the festivity weekend. And so I think just thinking outside of the box a little bit more and how we can reach out to our members at large, rather than spend money on snail mail and all the technology. We have it already. We have a 5K coming up. It's so easy to set a table and have information and be part of those things.
So use those events more to our advantage of getting information out when people are gathered in places.
Of course, you see a housing sign, you'd be surprised how many folks are going to line up and get information about that.
And I'd like to share as well. So I want to thank you for coming today, and also sharing that you've had conversations with the City Council, exploring the role that these commissions will play so that they can truly serve as an advisory board. So I'm happy that we're having the work study session today on the guidelines for the allocation of affordable housing funds. And I know that at the last City Council meeting, one of the council members, Vincent Sarmiento, directed staff to also do some research on other housing policies that exist across the state, such as rent control and just cause. So as those are being considered, I think it'd also be great if those could come to this commission so that we too can provide input, and so that the community is also able to provide their input at an earlier stage, so that we're not waiting until a council meeting, and it can be a very inclusionary process with this commission as advisory board and with community members.
That's a good idea. We hadn't, as we were talking about a work study for the council on rent control and rules, renters' rules and things, we hadn't really thought about involving commissions. We'll definitely look at that.
Thank you.
Do any other commission members, tenant or student members have any questions? No. Do we have a motion to receive and file item 3?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Cano. Do we have a second to the motion?
Second.
Thank you, Commissioner Ramos. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay. The matter passes with unanimous consent, with Commissioners De Leon and Garcia marked as absent.
Thank you very much, and if there's anything I can ever do or you have other questions, please don't hesitate to call.
Thank you. The next order of business is consideration of the work study sessions, item 4 and 5. Item 4, guidelines for the allocation of affordable housing. Will staff report on the matter?
Mr. Chairman, Robert Zerschmead, Acting Director. I was just chatting with the council, and item 5 is a presentation from the Orange County Healthcare Agency, and they are here visiting us today. And if it was the Commission's pleasure, it might be a good idea to perhaps flip the 2 items, allow them to make their presentation and take questions, and then be on their way. This item 4, I think, may take a little time.
Okay, are there any objections to switching items 4 and 5 from the Commission? We will go ahead and move on then first to item 5 and come back to number 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just, by way of introduction, with us today we have several members of the staff from the Orange County Healthcare Agency, led by Dr. David Nunez, who will be assisted by Julie Tran. And they're going to be giving us a presentation on lead contamination. I know there was a question from one of the commissioners about this, and so they are here for us today. And welcome, Dr. Nunez.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. I appreciate the opportunity for us to speak with you this evening. The context of this presentation is, many of you may be aware, there was a recent series of articles that were published online, and the reporter highlighted two findings. One, that there were a high number of children in a particular zip code in Santa Ana that were testing positive for lead. That was one item. And then the other is that the reporter did her own testing of soil samples throughout Santa Ana and was reporting on findings, according to her testing, that there was lead in the soil, and highlighting that as a concern. So I think that was the reason why we were invited tonight. And this provides the context for us to talk about, what are we doing with regards to lead poisoning prevention in the county and in Santa Ana. And what we really do is we take a public health approach. And so the backdrop on lead and children is that it is the most common preventable environmental disease among California children. And it is really an insidious exposure. It affects multiple organ systems, but a particular concern are the impacts on the brain and development, cognitive effects that cause, for many, lifelong learning and behavior problems. And the really worrisome item is that no known safe levels of lead are known. So even low exposures can have impacts. A problem with lead poisoning is that it's a silent disease. Children frequently have no obvious symptoms. So we can't really counsel parents about what to look for early signs of lead exposure. And for that reason, prevention is the approach that we follow, so that we prevent that primary exposure and any detectable lead in these children. And the way we do that is through screening, as an opportunity for early diagnosis, identification of exposures in the environment, and follow-up with these families and children. Now, I mentioned the issue of lead in the soil. The real complicated issue about lead is that it's not just found in some of the most common sources that we know about, such as lead paint, interior and exterior paint, lead from leaded gasoline that creates a legacy of pollution and lead contamination in soil, but it really is a variety of sources that we find in terms of case investigations. We see paint, we see imported candies, imported toys, contaminated dust in the house that can be from paint, but also from dirt that's contaminated that's brought into the house, traditional remedies and cosmetics, take-home exposures, occupational sources such as those that do renovation of houses, but also folks that work in battery recycling plants and other fields that expose them to lead. They bring home that clothing, that can be a source of exposure. Imported pottery, imported jewelry. So it really is just a myriad of sources, and it's not just soil. So a few words about lead in soil. It is naturally occurring in the environment, and there are some known areas where there are higher concentrations of lead in the soil. But unfortunately, as I mentioned, it can also be a legacy of prior contamination. So peeling or flaking lead-based exterior paint in particular can create lead in soil. I mentioned the past use of leaded gasoline, which finally was removed as a fuel source in 1976 to 1980, and that dramatically reduced exposures and levels of lead in blood for children, but still remains out there. And then, of course, industrial sources, as I mentioned, from factories and other sources. And the way that lead, in particular in soil, can be ingested is through hand-to-mouth activity, which most toddlers and small children, as you know, do constantly. Everything they touch goes in their mouth. But it can also be resuspended in the air through various activities, or it can be brought into the house on shoes or clothing and then gets into house dust. So the science of lead in children and exposures shows that, again, the things that rise to the front are that lead in paint, so lead in older housing, particularly pre-1950 when there was more, but then again pre-1978 housing when there was still lead in paint. And so if there's a deteriorated paint in the house, if there's flaking, chipping paint, or if the home has gone recent renovation, in which case they didn't know there was lead in the paint and they made a lot of house dust and paint dust, those are ways in which lead can be particularly concentrated in that household. Toddlers, I mentioned, especially young children, because of that hand-to-mouth behavior. Another behavior that's listed up there is pica, which is when children will eat non-nutritious items such as dirt or other things. It's a behavioral problem that creates exposure. And then what the science also shows, and epidemiology shows, that children who are poor, who are in publicly funded programs such as Medi-Cal, our Children's Health and Disability Prevention Program, WIC, Head Start, these children in particular are at risk from lead exposure. And we also know that there are other countries throughout the world where the lead exposure is great in the environment, and so those children also may come in with high lead levels. So that informs how we do our targeted assessment, and this is a statewide program funded by the California Department of Public Health, and what it mandates is that we test children at 12 and 24 months of age, so really hitting that early toddler period. But in particular, the law requires that we screen all children from publicly funded programs, and so any child in those programs listed there should be identified by the provider as at risk and should get those 2 blood tests at age 1 and 24 months. We also recommend catch-up testing for those children older who never had those previous tests, and if there's a change in circumstance that the family reveals, that would put them at risk based on occupational exposures, environmental exposures, etc. And then any parent that would request it for whatever reason that thinks there may be a problem with lead exposure, certainly we would do that in the clinical environment. And as I mentioned, prevention is the goal. So, before kids even get exposed, what we counsel our providers and our community partners to do is to know about lead hazards, to provide simple written prevention information. And I brought packets, 5 of them. We can definitely get more information, but we've got a lot of handouts and brochures that we'll make available to you that include simple messages. Things that parents can do are to encourage frequent hand washing of children and themselves, washing toys, pacifiers, anything that can go in the mouth frequently, and especially for soil, to prevent and reduce bare soil exposure. So not letting children into those areas, certainly removing their shoes, and keeping dust levels to a minimum. And then there are also some nutritional things that parents can do. Iron deficiency and calcium deficiency can increase lead uptake, and vitamin C is important for having a good iron store, which can, again, reduce the impacts of lead exposure. Infant stimulation in terms of, providing parents with milestones and things to watch for in terms of warning signs if their child is not developing normally. For those who are exposed, certainly we do recommend that they be followed neurodevelopmentally, they be enrolled in Head Start or other programs that can make sure that they are successful, and certainly regular developmental follow-up and evaluation. Now, getting to Orange County in terms of our statistics, this is information comparing 2007 to 2014, and for children that have low levels of lead and higher levels, anything over 4.5 micrograms per deciliter, we see basically that the number of children who are showing these elevated levels is declining, and that's happening across the state, which is great news. There are, in fact, geographic disparities in reported cases of lead exposure in counties like Orange County, but also counties across the state. And those disparities are real. There are definitely zip codes that show higher numbers of children. And again, that's not to say that a single source has been identified, but it's that combination of risk factors, older housing, lots of children from publicly funded programs, and other environmental sources that can be at play. We did ask the state for some information regarding state-defined cases of lead poisoning, which I'll describe for you in the next slide. But essentially for this 3-year period from 2013 to 2015, we had 16 total cases of lead poisoning in children aged 0 to 20 in Orange County. Those are state-defined cases. Of these cases, 14 had probable environmental sources identified, and of those 14, there was not a single case. There were at least 2 exposures of probable exposures in those cases, meaning that it doesn't tend to be one single source of exposure. Soil was identified in only 2 of those 16 cases. And again, in Santa Ana, when we looked at it, there were only 3 cases in Santa Ana residents of those 16 for the entire county. So that's helpful to know. In terms of the state cases, these are children that have higher levels of blood lead present, anything over 14.5 micrograms per deciliter, and there are criteria based on venous versus capillary levels that are up on the slide. And basically, for any child that has these levels or higher, these are designated as state cases, and they receive case management services from our public health program. So our public health lead poisoning, childhood lead poisoning prevention program, or CLPBP, is what we have in Orange County. It's through our public health division, and there are 2 joint divisions that staff it: our family health program, which is the program I oversee, and then we have environmental health. And the types of services that are provided when we have a case who meets the state case definition include all of the components that are on the slide: public health nurse, case management, home visits. They do a detailed assessment of the environment, asking about potential exposures. They provide a lot of education. They also will look for other members that may be exposed in the household. And once environmental sources are identified, they will work with them to mitigate those exposures, and then follow the child longitudinally to make sure their levels, in fact, do go down. And of course, at children with higher levels, it becomes more of a medical emergency, and we have hospitalization and chelation strategies for those children. And so for any child, as I mentioned, with a lower level above that 4.5, we also will do some level of counseling and education to these families as well, and we'll also recommend to the provider that they do get repeat testing, usually within 1 to 3 months. And so we follow those children in some fashion as well. And the other thing that our program does is we do a lot of educational outreach, and this is really an opportunity for us to get to know you and be a resource to you, because we are out in the communities at community fairs. We do go to neighborhood programs, we go to businesses, we go to healthcare providers, and we are a resource that is a big part of what we do. So please call us if we can be of service to you in your communities. I'm going to pass the baton to Julie, who's going to talk a little bit more about the environmental side of the program. And then happy to answer any questions.
Good afternoon. Okay, so I'm here to discuss the role of environmental health. So our role is to conduct the environmental investigation. What that means is we go to the home and we actually try to figure out what the source is if we have a lead-burdened child. So we work with the public health nurse when we go to the home visit, and we follow our guidelines, which are set forth by California Department of Public Health. So we follow the protocols that are set forth. We use an X-ray fluorescence lead analyzer. So when we go to the home, we use our equipment. We are testing for lead in paint, lead in dust, and lead in the soil. With the XRF equipment, we're able to provide immediate results for the family, so that if we do find something, we notify the family and we can provide information on prevention of further lead poisoning and lead hazard exposure. We also collect water samples to ensure that our lead service lines and also the water service lines do not have lead, and also that the fixtures themselves do not have lead. We send our water samples to a lab that does the testing for us. And in some situations, we also do test non-housing, such as mini blinds or traditional pottery, or, you know, we had a situation where we had a frog planter that came from Mexico, and it did test positive for lead. We also conduct investigations with complaints against unsafe lead work practices. So anyone that is doing work on their home where they're sanding or grinding without a HEPA vacuum, hydroblasting or using high pressure washing on the exterior of their home and they're not using any kind of containment, if they're using some type of abrasive blasting or sand blasting without a HEPA vacuum, or if they're doing a lot of dry scraping or sanding. So lead can be found inside of the home or outside of the home, and the only way to determine if a home does have a lead is to get the home tested. And the testing must be done through a certified California Department of Public Health lead professional, and that would be an inspector assessor. So to avoid the spread of lead in the home, we recommend that you keep the home clean and dust-free. So a lot of mopping, a lot of wet wiping, vacuuming, and washing surfaces to prevent lead and dust from spreading in the house. Keep furniture away from paint that is chipped or peeling. So objects that allow children to climb up to have access to a windowsill where the paint is chipping, we would recommend that furniture be relocated. Now, unless the paint has been tested or does not have lead, don't sand, dry scrape, power wash, or sandblast it to avoid spreading lead dust from the paint. And to cover bare dirt, so grass, gravel, pour concrete, maybe put some bushes like rose bushes that would prevent children from accessing areas that could potentially have lead in the soil. So at this time, we're hoping to have more opportunities for partnership with the City of Santa Ana. We would love to provide more of our outreach brochures that we have, which are located in here, and we can definitely provide more. We are hoping to connect with our community-based organizations so that we can kind of reach more of the people that are doing home improvement, do-it-yourself, and the affordable housing. We're hoping to connect with the city community development to enforce the lead regulations. We would like to connect with the Work with Santa Ana Work to provide lead-safe training information. We would like to review the current programs to see if there are any opportunities where we can collaborate together. We would love to connect with the tenant representatives so that we can provide more information to our tenants out there, and also connect with our student representatives so that we can get that same information to our students with families. And we would also like to connect with the other boards and commissions within the city so that we can provide more outreach and training.
Thank you very much.
Happy to answer any questions if you have. And our phone numbers as well for the program for both family health and environmental health. We can get you more resources.
Okay,
Just call.
I'm sure there's going to be a few questions. Go ahead.
Sure.
Members.
Thank you for the presentation. It was very, very informative and very refreshing to hear. My only question is, roughly how much does it cost to have a certified lead professional to come in and inspect a home? I mean, for an average family, is this something affordable? Is it something expensive?
There's information in the packet. The State Department of Public Health on their lead poisoning prevention program page has a list of EPA-approved labs that can come do testing on soil and paint. On the website, they indicate that the charge is anywhere from $25 to $50. So, certainly, it is not uncostly. We have not independently verified what the costs are. Do you know?
So anywhere between $25 and $50 would be a soil, a lead and soil sample testing. To actually conduct a full evaluation of the entire house, to test every wall, every component, It really depends. We don't conduct that within our within healthcare agency.
So that's
However,
contracted
I
out.
have heard that it depends on the size of the home. What is like? Do they want the entire home to be tested? Do they want just a particular room where they're planning on doing renovation? So the cost of that does vary.
And there are several businesses in Orange County that do the testing. I've been to the website, so there are a number of potential businesses that could be accessed.
Awesome. And then do you guys have any kits that you guys could give away during the resource fairs, or is it just information based?
Most of what we do is information. We generally don't recommend just the wipe tests for lead because it doesn't tell you how much lead is in a particular substance. It just means it's there. So we don't give those out, but we certainly have a lot of educational materials that we are able to bring to any kind of community fair.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other commission questions?
I have a few questions as well. So thank you for the presentation. In your presentation, you note that children in publicly funded programs are being tested. That's mandated. But do you have a percentage for how many of them are actually being tested, or is that information shared by CalOptima with your agency?
The lead data itself is challenging because the state owns all the data. All the tests that are performed by providers, it goes to the state, and then they report it back to us when they have an alert value. What the state does do is occasionally they will put data on the website for a given year, and there is data accessible from 2012, and it will show by zip code in counties the number of children tested and the percent that test positive. So we have that percent of the total that test positive. It doesn't tell us whether all the children in publicly funded programs were in fact tested. So that information I don't have. But I can tell you that the numbers of children tested in Santa Ana, it's very high. And so most children that should be tested, I believe, are probably getting tested.
Thank you. You also mentioned that there are known areas for higher concentrations of lead. Is that information easily accessible? Or if I lived in one of those areas, would I be informed? Is that information shared with the community?
Yeah, I didn't mean to imply that we know where lead is in each county, in each neighborhood. That information we don't have. I think the best that we can go from is the age of the housing stock. So in a particular neighborhood, if you know that you've got pre-1978 and pre-1958, I believe, are the years that we would be concerned about. So the housing stock, certainly if there's an environmental investigation in which the soil is identified as a source, there are levels of soil contamination that would require abatement. And I believe it's over 400 parts per million, and that's also in the information as well. But I think the real take-home message I wanted to give is that parents need to be concerned about a variety of sources. It's not just the soil, it's not just paint. It's a lot of things that can be found in cultural use or in things that are bought for children with good intentions, such as toys and candies and jewelry. So the most important thing is for us to really counsel parents about all of these other sources as well.
Great. So if I'm a parent that has received all of this information, I'm concerned that my child might have high levels of lead in their blood. I go get them screened. They test positive. When you come and look for that source, if you find it in the dirt outside of my home, do you then notify my neighbors, or what's the next step to ensure that outreach is continuing in areas where we now know that there are high levels of lead?
Okay, so if we come out and do an investigation of your home and do find that there is lead in the soil, we would notify the property owner. Whether it was you or you were renting, we would notify the property owner. Unfortunately, due to the confidentiality of the program and the case and public health information, we can't share that information with the neighbors. However, we would leave it up to you to inform your neighbors that you have a situation and it's a potential that they also might have the same situation, since their house is probably built around the same year.
And then who's responsible to take care of the issue with the lead? So if I'm a tenant and my landlord is not present and doesn't do anything, will the county or the city intervene to remedy that issue?
Yes, we do have lead regulations and enforcement. So we have been working with the city of Santa Ana to address a complaint that we did receive that did result in lead hazards in the paint and the soil. And so we try to work with the property owner, but if we are not successful, then we move forward with legal action.
Okay, so would that be similar to, for example, a city's code enforcement department where?
Yes, so that would actually be the first city entity that we would reach out to, is to work with our code enforcement and then go from there.
Okay, and then one last question. On the last part of the presentation, there's a lot of entities that you all want to collaborate with, and I noticed that one of them is students to provide information to the schools. Is there any collaboration that's ongoing with the school district or any other community-based organizations? I know you mentioned wanting to work with them, but are there any existing relationships?
Currently, we do not have a relationship with any of the school districts. However, we are working with Head Start.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Chair Tardif.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. This could be directed towards yourselves or towards city staff. I was wondering if there might be a general outreach that the city could make to possibly the community at large, all of our residents, without causing undue concern that there is possibility of a problem, and maybe all of the residents should be aware of this and be aware of these methods of minimizing the problem. Is a general outreach by the city something that we would want to consider?
I would say that absolutely that would be something that we would appreciate. We certainly make efforts to partner with cities across the county that have higher numbers of children that are burdened with lead to do proclamations. And I think Santa Ana has certainly been one of those cities. However, I think we could do much more than a proclamation in terms of community awareness and public awareness. So certainly we would welcome the opportunity to partner with on that effort.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, members of the Commission. We will bring your request as well to our Public Information Officer and determine if that be something that we can undertake.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Commissioner Cano?
No, that was a great presentation. Just if we want to invite you guys to a neighborhood association meeting, since many of the community members that go to those meetings really want to have know if their homes have lead, who do we reach out to?
You can reach out to the Family Health Division, which is the first number there, and that will get you someone from our local childhood lead poisoning prevention program, and we'd be happy to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Student member Solano, any questions?
Yes. So if lead poisoning was found in toys, candies, stuff that are in local stores that are imported also, do you think that you would go and check and see if the store also may have other things that might lead to lead poisoning?
Do you want to talk about that? It's a great question.
So, unfortunately, it's really difficult to determine what has lead and what doesn't based looking at it. We can have one toy that was imported in a country and it was okay. We didn't find any lead in it, and it could be another batch that comes in where the manufacturer changed the paint and now it does test positive. So it's difficult to go into a store to look around and say, this is lead, because it's consistently changing.
So that's why we generally counsel against using imported jewelry, imported toys, imported candies, just as a blanket recommendation, because That way, in at least the United States, there are regulations that prevent the introduction of lead into those products.
And Commissioner Ramos was speaking about you working with the schools and stuff and things like that. So I would just recommend that there are some SAUSD council meetings. Like, say, tomorrow they're going to have their first meeting with student representatives also. So I think that maybe if you found a meeting where they were there at the same time, I think you should speak with them, because they are likely to come back to their school and speak with their principal and ASB advisor, whoever sends them. And I think that promotion would be spread throughout the school and district.
That's a great recommendation. Can you make that connection with us in terms of the contact information?
And that's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just had one more question. I just thought about this now. How about for the holidays? I know that Halloween's upon us, and are you doing any outreach as far as social media to engage the community about lead in candy and how to screen?
I don't know that we've got anything specific planned for the holidays. I think certainly with the issue with candies and Halloween, it's a valid point, and certainly we can bring that to our health communications and policy folks, whether or not we can push out some social messages for the season. I think that's a great suggestion.
Thank you.
Excuse me. Senior Tenant Member Vasquez, did you have a question? Okay, thank you. I just have two brief questions. How old is the Clpbp program, roughly? I mean, is it a state mandated program that each county has, and how old is it?
It's been around for, I don't have the exact date, 19, 20 years. It's not mandated. It's certainly something that's offered to all counties to apply for the funding. And those counties that don't have the funding, the state provides those services in those jurisdictions. So most counties, I think, do have a CLPPP program.
From the funding. And one of the things I was sort of interested in was the complaints you receive involving unsafe lead work practices. Roughly in a year, how many complaints do you get? I mean, do actual employees and citizens call in and report these types of occurrences?
Yes, they do. Typically, we'll get a neighbor calling and telling us that, my neighbor was sanding and there's paint dust everywhere, all over my house, and he's not cleaning it up. So we presume that paint has lead in it if the home was built prior to 1978. And so based on that, we address it, and we presume that the home has lead-based paint. We reach out to the workers, if we actually find the workers doing the unsafe lead work practices, and we reach out to the property owner to make sure that, first off, they need to clean the mess that they've made, and then second, they need to conduct the work in a lead-safe manner.
And how many do you receive a year?
Oh, I'm sorry, and about 3 to 4 complaints received.
Okay, not that many, really. I'm surprised. Well, I wanted to thank you both for your presentation, and also remind the tenant and student members, commissioners, there's 5 pamphlets if anybody wants to take one with them after. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, we will switch back to item number 4 on the agenda, guidelines for the allocation of affordable housing development funds, and I believe there will be a staff report on this.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, Judson Brown will be conducting this presentation. I'll just make a couple of introductory remarks. The guidelines that we're going to be discussing with you tonight and really presenting, this is intended to be a study session. We're not asking you to take any action on this tonight, frankly, because there's a lot of material here. And we've been working for some time to develop it. This is in response to a request from the City Council, and we would like to have the Commission give its input so that we can make adjustments as appropriate and communicate your review to the Council when it goes before the Council. Judson is here to basically present the item, and then we'll be available for conversation about it.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission, and actually I am privileged to introduce Ms. Daisy Perez, who joined our team this week, who will be giving the presentation on our behalf. Daisy joins us from the City of La Habra. If you want to introduce yourself to that.
Good evening, Commissioners. As Judson said, my name is Daisy Perez. I am the new Housing Programs Analyst with the City, and I am here to present the allocation of affordable housing policies and procedures. So these draft policies and procedures for the affordable housing funds and land assets. The purpose of this document is to guide how these funds and assets will be allocated, committed, loaned, and monitored with the intent to provide a transparent, open, and fair process for those interested in the allocation of these resources for affordable housing development. And I just want to note that a lot of the policies and procedures in these documents, so this is something that the city has already been doing. Staff has already been following similar methods, but there just hasn't been anything in writing. So this process is really to just solidify everything that we're doing and making sure that everybody's aware of the processes. So the policies and procedures are made up of several components. First, the policies and procedures outline the various funding sources available to the city, including several loan and grant options. Next, they describe the RFP process in great detail, including requirements for submittal and competitive selection criteria scoring system. And the policies and procedures detail, they also provide details regarding how the funds will be committed, loaned, and monitored. Just a note on that, given how many of these funding sources have fairly detailed regulations and monitoring requirements, a summary of the requirements are listed in the policies and procedures to give potential developers an idea of what to expect. But further details and requirements will be distributed during the actual RFP process and load documents for the specific projects. So the policies and procedures cover various affordable housing funds and sources that are available to the city. The first is the Low and Moderate Income Housing Asset Fund. So this is tied to the Housing Successor Agency Fund, which basically takes all the funds from the old or former Redevelopment Agency. This includes land assets owned by the Housing Authority acting as the Housing Successor Agency that must be developed for affordable housing or sold at or above fair market value to increase the low and moderate income housing asset fund. Next, we also have the Inclusionary Housing Fund. So funding from this program is provided using revenues generated through in lieu fees from the city's Housing Opportunity Ordinance that Council adopted in October of 2015. The next two programs, the Home Program and the Cdbg program, are federally funded programs through HUD. The Home Program includes 15% set-aside funds that have to be allocated through a Community Housing Development Organization, or CHODO. And then also an important note for the home funds, housing that is assisted with home funds must meet at a minimum the city's property standards, including all applicable state, local, and federal codes and regulations. And we also have the project-based voucher program. So with the project-based vouchers, these are a component of the Housing Authority's Choice Voucher program. So funding for project-based vouchers comes from funds already obligated by HUD's to the Housing Authority under its annual contribution contract. So Housing Authority can attach up to 20% of its annual contribution contract to specific housing units if the owner agrees to either rehabilitate or construct the units, or if the owner agrees to set aside a portion of the units in an existing development. And the Housing Authority can use up to 20% of its housing choice vouchers for housing-based voucher projects. So each of the funding sources has slightly different requirements on what the potential uses are. But in general, the funding can be used to purchase existing multifamily or other buildings, to rent them to low or moderate income households. Can also be used to purchase or lease land and buildings for new construction or rehabilitation, or it can also be used for loan funds for any of the above purposes prior to the funding of private or public loans. Specifically, the policies and procedures outline eligible development costs that can be done with the different sources. So like I said, this can be site acquisition, rehab, new construction, and then also carrying cost, architectural, legal fees. If there's any relocation, it can potentially cover temporary or permanent relocation fees, and then developer fees. The policies and procedures also list in great detail the standard RFP process that the funds will go through. So when the housing staff determines that there's enough funds to develop a successful project, the city will put forth an RFP. This can be through an actual RFP process, RFQ, or a NOFA. The city will advertise this through a variety of sources, including the city's RFP listserv that's available, through the distribution of local nonprofit partners. We'll also publish this online on different websites like planetbid.com, and it will also be published in the local paper. So once the RFP is put out, then the developer will have enough time to submit a proposal. When the proposal comes back, then they have to their proposals will be scored using a comprehensive selection criteria that's outlined in the RFP. So that includes various components. The most important and the one that has the most weight is if the RFP, or how the RFP incorporates different levels of affordability and the target population that it addresses. So in the document, it'll specifically lay out on page 11 a further detailed table of this. So if the project is designed for larger families, they'll get a certain number of points. And then just based on different priorities that the city has outlined, it will be ranked accordingly. So it also includes how the project will leverage city funds, the property management experience and skills of the developer, if the project is ready for development, anticipated cash flows, just financial feasibility of the project, and where the project is being located. The RFP, the Affordable Housing Policies and Procedures also includes just basic guidelines on the loan terms and closing procedures. So just important thing to note, when the loan is ready for approval, housing staff will actually bring everything to this commission for their recommendation before it goes to City Council for final approval. And then once the project is approved and built or rehabilitated, then staff will conduct monitoring on an annual basis. And that's it for just the general outline of the policies and procedures. I know most of you received them today, so you haven't had a chance to really look at those. But if something jumps out at you, if you have questions, please let me know. So staff will email out electronic copies of the policies and procedures. We're asking if you can submit your comments to us using track changes by Friday, October 13th. And then staff will take your comments, and then we will present this item to the Economic Development, Infrastructure, Budget, and Technology Committee on November 13th. And then after that, I believe we will bring it back. Yeah, we will bring it back here with their comments. And that concludes my presentation, unless there are questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Perez. And You've only been with the city for a week?
2 weeks, 2.5 weeks.
Well, welcome.
Yeah. Thank you.
Before I open it up for questions or comments from the fellow commissioners and student and tenant members, the last part really helped clarify what you were asking us to do since we just saw this today and letting us know that we have a few weeks to review this and come back with questions, suggestions, updates. So that's very helpful.
Yeah, so if you have any questions on this or if you need any clarification, can they contact me directly? Yeah, you can contact me directly. So if you want to call me, my direct line is, if you want to write it down, or you want to send this
You'll
out?
probably come through Tay.
What was that? Okay, so Tay can send out my contact information, and you can just contact me directly in the meantime if you have any questions or just need any additional information.
And I just, Mr. Chairman, if I just
Absolutely.
could add obviously it would be Daisy's preference to have your comments electronically. However, if someone is like me, who is sometimes challenged in using track changes, if you would prefer to have a hard copy and interlineate comments on a hard copy, we would be happy to provide that to you.
Thank you very much. With that in mind, I'll just open this up to any questions or comments from the commission. Tay?
And if I can time out for a suggestion, just to keep everything in order, I think it would make more sense to have one channel to decide right now who we're going to send everything to. And if we can work on one document, that would be great. We use Dropbox here at the city. I don't know if anyone has access to that.
I know what it is. I'm not sure if everybody else uses it or does.
Okay. Would it be helpful if I loaded it on Dropbox?
Tay, I think we're going to need to allow each commissioner to make their comments, and then it'll be staff's job to go through and compile them.
Okay.
But I understand the point you're trying to make, but we want to make it convenient for them.
Okay.
Thank you.
And hopefully we won't overload it, because there'll be a lot of different things coming back. So, point taken. Commissioners? I think with the time we have, we'll see the document and go from there. Is there any other instructions from the city on this?
No, your comments, your revisions, your improvements are greatly appreciated. The scope of this is important to know. It's for the allocation of our affordable housing funds, so you want to make sure that it's applicable to the scope of the document itself. I'm really glad to have Daisy present this today. In the future when we're drafting RFPs and things like that, Daisy's usually the first one to do the legwork on those RFPs that we issue and the public notices and that kind of thing. So it's great to have her join us and join our team.
Having had you just say that, it did bring up something I did want to ask. Just for clarification, I know what two of the terms mean, but can you tell us what RFP, RFQ, and NOFA stand for?
Yeah, so
an RFP stands for request for proposals. An RFQ stands for request for qualifications. The primary difference between an RFP and an RFQ is an RFP is if we're making funds available for affordable housing development, we're requesting proposals for those funds to be used for affordable housing development. An RFQ, on the other hand, may be used for environmental services that we may need for our housing division, or an RFQ for a particular developer to utilize a certain amount of funds for a particular area or neighborhood. A notice of funding availability, a NOFA stands for Notice of Funding Availability, and it's essentially the same thing as an RFP. The state, I see the state using NOFA, other cities may use NOFA. We use RFP, the term RFP.
Thank you very much. I didn't know if you had a question, Vice Chair. No. Okay.
I actually have a few questions just from the quick review. So on page 15, based off page 14 and 15, so I'll start with page 14 under Management and Affirmative Marketing Plan. So on the top of page 15, it says no person shall on the grounds of multiple reasons be subjected to discrimination under any programs or activities funded in whole or part with these funds. So the city of Santa Ana recently became a sanctuary city, and I don't notice that immigration status is on there as one of the reasons for which they should not be discriminated. So I'll send this in writing too, but I'd like to recommend that that be added so that we are in fact in alignment with our sanctuary city status now. And for local preference, so I'm seeing that you would like for there to be local preference for current Santa Ana residents and those that work in the city. And when you evaluate a loan request, you're evaluating the applicant's effectiveness in doing this. But how is that? What's the form of accountability there? So if I received the loan, how is there a follow-up to see if I'm actually doing as I said I would, or what? And I don't know if that's mentioned here maybe later in the packet, since I haven't read the entire thing yet.
Judson, maybe you could explain how local preference works as a project is implemented.
Yes.
I think that's what you're trying to get at in the question.
Yes. So when a project's close to being developed, right? The developer is going to develop their tenant selection policies, and in those policies, a developer is going to have a local preference for Santa Ana residents who live or work in our city. So we review and receive those tenant selection policies as a part of our monitoring of the project prior to the certificate of occupancy being issued. And so we do check. We will be able to check and verify in those tenant selection policies that our local preference is being implemented. Now, in terms of the additional monitoring of that requirement, on an annual basis, we conduct on-site monitoring of all of our affordable housing projects that are funded with our affordable housing funds. And during that on-site monitoring, we're also able to see and verify that any new tenants who are placed in that project are in compliance with the tenant selection policies, which have our local preference in them.
Okay, and those are all one more question off that. So I see below are the priorities for those residents under local preference. And under number 1 for first priority, letter E is a government displacement as a result of, and letter E is governmental action such as code enforcement. So I've worked with code enforcement in the past, and I know of residents that are given notices to leave their units after code enforcement has came in to do an inspection. But how can a resident prove that they were displaced as a result of the action? Because I know that can be difficult.
Thank you very much for that comment. We can further define that in the.
Yeah, I think it's great that it's there because we know that it happens, but since we don't have just cause policies where a landlord has to let you know why you're being asked to leave, I may be asked to leave because code enforcement came in, but the landlord isn't going to say that. So as a tenant that was displaced as a result of that, how am I able to prove that so that I then get first priority as I'm applying for a unit that I'm in need of?
I think the challenge here is how do you capture that information and then keep it over time so that you actually have a list of eligibility. So we'll get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from the commissioners?
Yes.
Commissioner Santana?
Thank you, Daisy, for your presentation and for coming in. But for me, this would have been great if we received this presentation, Ms. Guilford, earlier today, so we could have these more questions. I understand that we're going to be emailing back and forth, but it's one thing to email as an individual, as amongst our fellow commissioners, that we can weigh in and have more of these discussions, face to face and open audience. But I know this is not we're not voting on this action, right? Right.
No, in fact, what's happening tonight is that we have given you a draft.
Correct.
You have not had an opportunity to read it, although some of the commissioners have had a chance to look at it very briefly. And our expectation is you would take this time to read it, and that could be a conversation with the staff in the meantime. There are limitations as to what you can do as commissioners because of the Brown Act, obviously, and I would be remiss not to mention that. But we're really looking. I would fully expect if I was not a housing development professional to go through this document, just the definitions alone are going to be something new to, I think, many commissioners. And so we expect questions, and in addition to your comments, and that's what Judson and Daisy are prepared to do.
Great. And if we can get this, are we sending this electronically, right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes,
good.
of course. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. That's it.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Will this policies and procedures, will this come back before us as a body to move on it, or?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Turnip. It will come back before you for an official vote, and with the recommendation to City Council for a final approval.
Okay, great. And we can ask questions, comments at that time also.
Yes, absolutely. And in all respect to Tay as well, we were making edits on the document. We've been working on this nonstop, and we've been making edits like an hour before the meeting. So, she didn't receive the presentation until 1 o'clock today. 2. So, yeah, we were preparing in haste for this meeting.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. I believe that concludes the work study session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, continuing on. At this time, does the public have any comments they wish to share with the Commission? Please know you would have 3 minutes to speak. Appears to be no public speakers. Thank you. Does staff have any comments they wish to share with the Commission?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a few announcements on events and activities. On September 20th, the California Tax Credit Allocation Committee recommended almost $1.5 million toward the First Street Apartments project. That's at 1440 East First Street. It's a 64-unit project, and it also includes about $8.5 million in funds from the Redevelopment Housing Successor Agency, along with 8 project-based vouchers from the Housing Authority. Then on the 22nd of September, CDA staff attended the Orange County Active Transportation Forum that's focused on transit and housing, and included a walking tour of the Delhi neighborhood, and featured a keynote speaker, Chuck Marone, who is the founder and president of Strong Towns. The mission of Strong Towns is to inspire cities and neighborhoods to pursue development that allows them to be financially strong and resilient. At the forum, the city was recognized for its efforts in increasing the amount of affordable housing and active transportation improvements in the city. Then on September 19th, the council approved the Homeless Prevention, Intervention, and Mitigation Plan. That approval includes the hiring of a homeless services manager, and the intent there is to improve coordination between all of our city agencies and enhance coordination with the County of Orange and neighboring cities, increase nonprofit and faith-based services, and advocate for legislation. Last night, our staff attended the Artesia Pilar Flower Park Neighborhood Association meeting to promote the city's single-family rehabilitation home improvement loans, and that was at George Washington Carver School, and we had program flyers that we distributed. And then this coming Saturday, the staff will promote our down payment assistant housing program at Santa Ana College during a home ownership information session. And today, Judson just made it back from Los Angeles, where he participated in a presentation to housing authorities ranging all the way down to San Diego and LA and others, and was featuring our family self-sufficiency program. And I joked with him when he returned. I said, "Oh, so," and this was HUD sponsored this event. And I said, "So this was we were training the trainers," and so the answer was yes. So our policies and practices and many of our programs are held up as standards for others to follow, and so this was another example of that. And that's all I have today.
Thank you very much. At this time, commission members, please note that no member may speak more than once until all have had an opportunity to speak. Also, the commission may vote to limit our comments to 3 minutes each if we feel the need. With that being said, start with commissioner and member comments with student member Solano.
I really don't have any comment at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Cano?
No, just thank you for the presentations. I'll definitely start reading the great work you guys put together, so I'm looking forward to that.
Thank you. Vice Chair Tardif?
I'd just like to mention that I was privileged to attend the the historic Delhi neighborhood walkthrough with the OCTA, and it was very informative. Gives you an idea of, it's a lovely neighborhood, and how traffic interacts with the neighborhood, and how different home styles reflect the neighborhood, and in some areas where it's up against the industrial, how the homes turn their backs to that area in the railroad tracks. But overall, it was very informative and enjoyable. It was a beautiful day, and walked with Judson. I think one of our other tenant members was there, commission members. So that was very good. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Ramos?
Yeah, I would just like to thank staff, specifically Judson and Daisy, for working on this packet. I know it took a lot of time, and I'm glad that policies and religious practices are being solidified, and I'm happy to see that it's going to be a thorough process where we'll be able to give more comments. And I also want to thank Tay, because I took a look at the minutes from the last meeting, and they were very thorough. I think you did a very good job at capturing everything that was said. In comparison to other minutes that I've seen from other various meetings in various places, I think you did a great job. And I also wanted to thank the community members that were here. I think those that are still here, and I know we had a lot more members from the community here, so I think that was great. As a person that was a community member that would come to these meetings, and I was the only individual here, it's great to see that our meetings are growing in popularity. So I would hope. And that's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Santana?
Awesome, thank you. I'll keep mine very brief. I want to welcome two fellow commissioners, Mrs. Ramos and Mr. Vasquez, and Daisy from Hopper coming to Santa Ana. I just wanted to let the commission know that a couple weeks ago I had the privilege to do a walkthrough with Sylvia Vasquez at the Pacific Electric Park that's located on McFadden and Orange. That's money that was used and approved by this commission. It's great work from the contractors. You're seeing a lot of excitement from the community. This weekend we are doing a walkathon at Madison Park. We expect about 900 folks to be there. From here I'm going to run to that meeting, but I do welcome you guys to come by and see how active and vibrant Delhi neighborhood is. For Mrs. Guilford, thank you for all that you do. I know you do a lot of work, and it's a lot. I am requesting for Mr. Hodge, if we can think outside the box on how we do more outreach in the community. With doing the walkthrough at Fiestas Patria, it would have been nice to have a table or some information and to reach the tenants who are looking for more resources. If we could just add that into notes. And that being said, I want to thank you guys for giving this great presentation, and you've given us a lot of things to read at and email back and forth, and we're excited to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Senior Tenant Member Vasquez.
I don't have a public comment at this point. I decided instead we email it in.
Okay. Thank you very much. I just have a few brief topics. I was planning to let the commissioners know that I had received the letter from Ms. Kurtz, which she discussed when she was speaking. And I was going to work with, through Tay, to come up with the bio on all of our commission members and who we are and our backgrounds, so the council knows a little bit about our the diversity of the group that is working on this commission. And also through Tay was going to reach out to all the fellow commissioners to see if any of you would like to join me in that presentation, and I could split it up because I like to share that responsibility. So I will work with Tay to reach out to you for just a brief bio and to see which of you would like to come present when we do that. It's going to be in October or November. Secondly, I did note Tay sent out an email to all of us about the Orange County Housing Summit. I noticed the ticket price was pretty pricey, but I was curious if the city is sending staff, because I noticed Jamboree Housing is doing a presentation. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3 of our staff are attending the event. It's a privilege to attend this event. It's an important event with significant data on housing in Orange County, and many of our partner affordable housing developers attend, like Jamboree Housing, CNC, and I attended last year. I had the privilege to attend last year. It was very informative, and we are sending 3 of our staff.
Great. While you're there, Judson, I don't know if you have a preview of what's coming up in the October meeting, but it's quite possible I will be missing that meeting, and I've checked with my vice chair, and he will be available to chair that meeting. But I was just curious if you knew in advance of any serious topic or something that we might not want to miss. And if not, I can reach out to you in mid-October.
Well, so I do. Yes, if I can just pull it up here. Just one second.
No problem. While you're doing that, if I could, Tay, I believe in the past when we've received the agendas, whether it's Friday or Monday, the minutes have been attached to that. They weren't this time, so we didn't, we only had a few minutes to peruse them before the meeting because of being locked out. So I don't know if is it possible to attach the minutes to the agenda you email the commissioners?
Typically, the entire packet is included, but
Okay.
we were making
You were
a lot
up to the
of
last.
changes.
Understood. Okay, that's a good point.
So for the next October 25th commission meeting, right now we tentatively have 4 items planned for that meeting. The first item is a second amendment to a loan agreement that we have with Mercy House for the Joseph House project. It's just to summarize, it's a simple amendment that will allow them to increase their permanent housing units at the project for homeless individuals. The second item tentatively planned is an inclusionary housing agreement for Shea Homes. They are paying an in lieu fee, and we will absolutely ensure that the developer is invited to the meeting as instructed. And then our last 2 items are our Housing Division quarterly report and our Housing Authority quarterly report. Both reports you receive on a quarterly basis, as usual.
Thank you very much. Okay, at this time, this meeting is adjourned. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for October 25th. Thank you very much.
Sorry?
I'm going to assume you want a copy of the lead sample.
Yes, and can I also get the presentation that they gave us on the lead contamination?
The OCL thing? You don't have it?
Yeah, but I'd like a digital copy.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Can I get that tomorrow?
You can get it today.
Oh, okay. That's even better. Thank you so much. Yeah. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, you guys can see you. Remember, since you're not here. Oh yeah. But you guys can meet this Saturday. So
I'll be in San Diego, but it does.
Oh yeah.
I appreciate you always asking the commissioners. Thank you.
Yeah.
okay, great. Yeah, that definitely was helpful, and I think there's still some landscape that's kind of that. The city said it was a good. Yeah. A lot of there are larger assets like that. City county. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was good. I really love that scene. Maybe as well. I read the series of each one. You were very alarming. I learned, and I wish I would have asked them if they had any opinion on it. They mentioned it. They didn't really talk about it too much. But they, as they said, there are no levels of that.
Real quick, I didn't mean to put you on the spot. Is it okay if I email you next week just to say, can you email the commissioners for me to tell them your email address? It's 1 o'clock and that's all I have.
Yeah, I saw her Monday morning. Told me, and then when you came to get it out after that.
Yeah, so I went up to Sam's office, Cynthia had comments, and
Yeah,
so I didn't get final comments.
I went to Riverside. Well, I'm glad that it was a thorough process where it's gonna go to like the county and come back.
So all of staff comments are done, and
Since they're on public speaking.
Okay.
Well,
it'll be a fun journey.
I know there's like some complicated terms and stuff.
Okay. Great. Yeah, we're gonna call. Okay. Have a good night.
You too.
Same sex and a non-same sex.
Oh my gosh, I'm trying to get married, but I cannot. Anti-marriage.
Hey, if you saw you got an efficient way.
I know. We were gonna go to the city.
Town hall.
Yes. But that's kind of
It's easy. It's not a matter.
so not.
That's why I got it.
That's why I haven't written the first time. So
Maybe that's why it's not taken.
that's why I'm married.
Well, good luck with that.
I know, maybe I'm just like, eh.
Thanks again. Nice to meet you.
It's sweet, you know.
Okay. You did very well.
Thank you. Shot. I know Sophia warned you because she warned me. The best thoughts was like, hey, kiss my hand. And then you look at me and lose it.